Hello, Montana, and hello, world. This is Chris Hislop from the Montana World Affairs Council bringing you another episode of Connect Montana. It's been an extraordinary week here so far as we talk to those people in our communities and in our state who are involved in international nonprofits and organizations who have operations and engagement around the world. If you missed any of the shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they are available on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook feed. You don't want to miss those to learn a little bit more about how Montana is engaged with the world. Now, rounding out this week, I am very, very happy to present a friend of ours and a colleague. Lenka Beranova has over 20 years experience in the business and healthcare industries. She holds a BA in economics from the University of Pennsylvania, as well as a master's in kinesiology from San Jose State University. She's worked as an analyst and consultant in private sector. She was raised in the former Czechoslovakia under communist rule and escaped with her family at a young age. For the past 15 years, she's been dedicated to developing opportunities for children in education and recreation at numerous schools and institutions in the United States and abroad. As the founder and executive director of Seeds for Dreams and co-founder of a similar organization in Slovakia, her focus has been to help schools create and sustain underfunded school programs that provide educational opportunities for children during and after school. Today, while working internationally, she resides in Montana and is an instructor at Montana State University in the Jake Jabs College of Business and Entrepreneurship and in the College of Health and Human Development. She believes that together we can make a bigger positive impact by starting at the grassroots level and engaging young children in programs that teach them the essential life skills and responsibility and in community. Lenka believes that every child deserves a safe place to learn, dream, and play. That's one of the best parts of this job is introducing these incredible people. So Lenka, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm going to pass over to you to give us a little better understanding of yourself, your organization, and its engagement in the world.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege and an honor to be part of this podcast with you. I absolutely love the work that Montana World Affairs Council does for Montana, our community, so I'm really appreciative of being hosted on the show with you. Our biggest initiative is, as you just mentioned, is being able to provide educational opportunities that are sustainable for our schools, for our communities, but also to be able to draw awareness, the needs that schools have in particular communities, and have a bigger picture to recognize that education is for us, for all of our communities, the foundation and the economic stability of many of those communities that we can reach.
Lenka, maybe I can just pick up on that. It's been a very interesting theme throughout the week as we talk to people who are describing community need and that, not all of the needs of communities are met by individuals or by our governments and so on. And it's been an extraordinary learning curve to find out how organizations like yours, how do you come to understand the needs of a community before you actually begin, doing your programs?
That's absolutely true. Every community has different needs. I mean, when we initiated the program in California, those community needs were different, such as here in Montana as well. But even just within Bozeman or Whitefish, there's such a difference between just going in between towns. Even within Montana, we can find a variation of needs there as well. And internationally, our focus as was Slovakia really originated there because that's where our roots are. It's recognizing those people in that community and also the influencers. And so influencers are different communities, particularly in that community. When our initial program that we started in Slovakia had to do with a giving tree program during the holiday season. Most of that community is very Catholic. And we also saw a need there where low-income families and the needs for children weren't being met in some way. And through those experiences, is we thought that, we have to reach the influencers in those communities, and those were the elders. And so those would be the people that would be going to church, and those would be the elders to initiate those programming, because partially of understanding the need is also developing trust in those communities, and trusted sources and influencers in those communities. And so that was our biggest initiative, is recognizing, which program do we initiate first? And from there, multiple different programs grew. Once you develop that trust with your influencers, the influencers then can communicate and downstream or upstream that information to the others. So we started with the elders, and then it led to their children, who are now parents who have children. And so we have multiple programs that then developed from there. And so recognizing the need there, and bringing the community together, as we see currently, we see a lot of violence and despair, and people trying to reach out and recognizing, wanting to be heard in our communities today. It's the same thing with other communities as well. As you come in, you start talking to people. What is it that you need? What are some of the resources that you're lacking? So the other program we initiated, so we have multiple programs. We have a holiday giving tree program, holiday food drive program. We recognize that, okay, we can provide maybe books and utensils and other resources for kids in education in schools. And we can maybe reach out to them during the holidays, especially during a time of giving. That was really important to show them that there are other community members out there who care. Right? Who care about you. There are neighbors out there who care about you. So if you're struggling, please reach out and let us know. From there, we recognize that there are some families who actually don't have resources where they actually can sustain their livelihood through food. And so we recognize we need to engage not only a holiday giving tree program where families go together with their kids to the stores and they buy things that they think a 5 or 6-year-old could wear or use, so we initiate with kids. That's our fundamental important, is starting with the kids. Then we recognize by actually delivering these items to homes and to these families is that they need food. They don't have a job. They actually need food. And so from there, by talking to them, by sitting down with them and recognizing what they need, that they need food on their tables. And so then the food drive began, and then they need jobs. So then we try to connect them to the CEDA resources of who to talk to, to be able to facilitate job opportunities. Then we went to the schools. I remember 6 years ago, that's how PLAYFWD, the recreational fun run and Olympic Games program, started at our schools. We decided to visit the schools. And I remember as a child how important sports and education were important for me. And I know many of us can relate to that, even from a health perspective. But I remember going to some of the schools in Slovakia, and I remember listening to the parents. I remember listening to the teachers telling me, they don't have heating in the kindergarten. They have holes in the ceiling where water's leaking down the side of their, school while kids are in school. I would walk into the gym class, and there's broken glass and there's graffiti on the outside, and they just didn't have the resources they need. And I could be sitting there with the principals. They were just deflated. They felt like they had no hope, despite the fact that despite the fact that Slovakia went through its change after the Velvet Revolution in Velvet Revolution, I think it was in 89 or 90-ish, and then 93 was the separation of Czech versus Slovakia. And now they're part of the EU. Schools just don't have the funds and the resources to be able to even sustain certain programs within the schools themselves. And I would meet and sit down with the principals, and they were just, all they do is paperwork all day to try to struggle to get at least 2,000 or 4,000 euros to be able to support their school programs, to be able to get the resources they need to be able to teach effectively. And so when I said to them, I said, I have this idea. I don't know where it'll go, but let's give it a shot. Let's give it a try. And they said, well, we'll do anything, let us know if this can work. And so that's how sports programs at the schools is, excite the school, give it life, empower the school, excite them, show them how to do things, how to reach out to corporations and let them know what their needs are. And so, that's kind of how it starts. It starts by listening, really listening to your communities that you're trying to reach out to, and listening to what are the needs that you have. And then we think of like, what are the resources that we have that we can connect them to be able to sustain that, and to also show them how they can sustain those programs on their own, so they don't necessarily have to rely on us as the organizers. They have the resources now available to them to be able to sustain those programs. And so what we found is that when we engaged our elderly influencers, then they talked and showed what was happening in the community, so that they saw, oh, there's another program I could engage in. Or my kids are engaged in a horticulture program that was supported by Seeds for Dreams. Oh, we need to plant our plants with the children at the school. And so now the parents are engaged. Now the parents recognize what the needs are of the schools. Now they recognize that when they walk to the school, kids are excited to go to the school. When we did the PLAYFWD fun run, and we still do it every year, we have 4,000 kids plus members of the communities that come and engage in these programs. We have the government engage, we have the mayor come, we have the EU representative come to the community. So we think of it, as I probably mentioned to you before with our talks together, constituents, every constituent is a piece of a pie. And they're so important on so many different levels. And so when you engage a child and the child comes home excited about the things that they want from a fun run that they can use in the classroom, and they solely also with their team contributed to that cause, it really makes a tremendous impact on the family. And then the parents who work for the company that supported the fun run or supports the school horticulture program, they're excited to go to work. And the employer sees that, it's a way to unite not only its coworkers, but also create a collaborative relationship with everyone that's working there. So it's tremendously exciting and empowering to know that we can empower our communities just by listening to what their needs are, how we can help and connect in making our communities better. That's really what it comes down to, is thinking about the needs, thinking about the resources, and how do we unite? How do we collaborate? How can we make a bigger impact and continue to build on making our own communities better, where we live.
Lenka, a lot of what you say, of course, sounds very familiar to
Yeah.
us. Although a lot of your work is in Slovakia primarily, when you talk about kids loving sport, when you talk about underfunding of education and the problems that schools face, these things are familiar to us. But I wonder if you could say just a few more words to give our viewers a little more flavor about Slovakia, the communities in which you work. Not simply like, on the surface, but looking down, a little bit on the community dynamics, and let us know from your perspective, what kind of connections do you see between, say, similar communities in Montana and the communities you work in Slovakia?
You said it, similarities. Underfunded programs, not enough maybe people or individuals or awareness about what the needs are of the school. I think it comes down to lack of communication. I think that's one of the biggest similarities, is that they can maybe some way people are afraid to ask for what their needs are and what their resources are. And I think so it's a little bit different in the sense that Slovakia is still very new to philanthropy. While people do want to volunteer and give their time, volunteerism volunteerism is a still very unique thing, that people do want to be engaged. People want to be able to help. They just don't know how to help, or people are maybe afraid to help. Here in Montana, some of the resource similarities are also school underfunded programs, but seems to be a bigger involvement of parents in school systems. They have, parent conference, teacher meetings as well to figure out what the resources and needs are of the schools. So I would say in Montana, it's been a little bit different. I have worked in Montana with one school called Highlight Elementary School in the community. And one of their initiatives was to raise funds for their sports programs and recreational after school programs. And they initially started with a Bozeman color fun run. And I thought, okay, well, this is a great opportunity for me to show them what the resources are and show them how to communicate with different community partners and business owners to help them recognize what the needs are of the community. What's really interesting here is, and the difference here in these communities are, as well as similar to California, is that when your parent has kids in one school, they tend to focus on one school. And what it tends to do, and especially what I noticed was in California, it segregates communities. Because schools from areas where there are higher economic feasibilities for those community members tend to be more privatized. And so there are a lot of amazing resources for those students, right? And there continue to be. Versus on the east side of Palo Alto, right, there are not a lot of community opportunities. It's more of a low income, middle income type of community. It segregates. And it creates a shift and a divide in those communities. And so that's something that I wanted to almost, in a way, prevent from happening in the community where we started in Slovakia with some of the PLAYFWD fun runs and sports games. Is what we did is said, all of the schools come to the fun run. Everyone that comes will benefit from this activity. Tell us what your resources are, so then we can contribute to your community, so that we can contribute to your community, right? So that's one of the biggest difference. And I think that's a really big hurdle for the schools, for the underfunded programs in these communities, because parents tend to think unilaterally, my kids go here, so this is the school I support. They think more from, I would say, a micro perspective instead of a macro perspective, because when you actually help everybody in a community, your community will grow and thrive instead of creating this segregated community movement between like East Palo Alto and the Los Gatos, or some of the other wealthier communities of California. And so that those are the similarities, underfunded programs. The differences, I would say, especially here in the US, you see segregation between those communities and those sectors. It's what one school gets versus another school. There are really big differences.
I think that's a really great example of the kind of work that you're doing and the other guests that do on community development, these kind of underlying dynamics, like you described, this kind of unintentional segregation, for example, and so on,
Absolutely.
are things that it's a very tricky social dynamic that organizations really have to be aware of. Now, another common theme throughout this week has been a couple things. One is a focus on children, and you've mentioned
Mhm.
that and a little bit about
Mhm.
why that is.
Mhm.
And obviously, the other point is an international engagement or international perspective.
Mhm.
So I want to ask the most basic question, Lenka, from your perspective. Why work with kids? Why do that? I mean, the decision makers and the money makers are adults. Why
Mhm.
not work with adults, number one? And number two, why why should Montanans and Americans be concerned about international development and international engagement?
Mhm.
We have, as you said yourself, and as I know, we have the same problems in the schools here. Underfunding, trying to get students engaged, trying to get
Mhm.
families and communities engaged in this kind of work. So I put that out. I know it's a big question, but
Okay,
if we
so
could just
yeah.
get your views.
So the first one is grassroots. I think of grassroots children. That's why our organization is called Seeds for Dreams. You want to plant that seed early on, engage them in programming that shows them how working together collaboratively on a project or revival of school settings or delivering food to a family in need really also benefits not only them. I mean, it just brings a smile to another family, but ultimately benefits the whole community as a whole. Um, and also, we believe that young minds are most open to giving, understanding, and in welcoming diversity and cultural awareness. Instead of, and in a way, also by doing these different programs, especially at the grassroots level, we're enticing and showing children how they can utilize their emotions and energy in a positive direction, right? And so instead of, in a way to sort of eliminate some of the aspects of some of the communities, especially in developing sectors, there's violence and there's intolerance, there's poverty, and there's a great misunderstanding of the world. And so starting at the grassroots level gives children the opportunity to see the world from a different perspective. And so our other initiative with PLAYFWD, really what is still in the works, is to be able to engage our schools and the children with other schools around the world to recognize, in like a PayPal system, to recognize other cultures. And so one of the initiatives that the EU started was actually storytelling and different stories, and storytelling through books that kids say or parents read to their children in different cultures, right? But also doing it in such a way so that children learn about different cultures around the world and how it is okay to do things differently. As far as international awareness, I think it's important and vital to recognize that we are not the only ones struggling with the same needs, that there are needs that are similar to different areas of the world, as are they here. I mean, do we have poverty in Montana? Absolutely. Do we not want to see it? I think many people don't want to recognize that we have poverty in Montana. I think people don't want to recognize that there's intolerance, to ethnic diversity here in Montana as well. And it's the same thing internationally. And so many times, even there, we would take a business owner who, is a CEO of a corporation to our holiday food program or holiday giving tree program. And we would say, would you like to deliver these gifts to these families? And you can see, how this family is doing, so you can actually connect. The really important piece is to be, as a nonprofit, to be able to connect our donors to their audiences, to help them recognize and see what's actually happening in the community. The visual aspect and the emotional aspect of connecting and engaging people is really important. So we asked him to come with us, and he did, and he was absolutely shocked by what he saw. He had no idea that families could be living in such poverty, that families didn't have a bed or a place to sleep, that they were still working from a cooktop, and like burning wood to, make bread or make a meal. I mean, I think it's unfathomable for us to recognize that, we're here in Montana. We're sort of isolated in Bozeman. I think, many sectors in different cities and towns across the US tend to be isolated to. The more aware we are, I think the better in recognizing those different diversities and changes that we see in those communities, and how important it is for us as citizens to recognize those needs and to be supportive, because ultimately it benefits everybody as a whole when we can help out and reach out to different sectors.
Lenka, I think I have time for one more question, if you would.
Okay.
You mentioned something really interesting in your intro, talking about a kind of, your work is multi-generational now, where you were working
Yes.
with kids and now they have kids and so on. There's a number of our viewers and people who see the show on YouTube who are from the nonprofit community here in Montana, and who would be very interested to hear about a little bit more about the hows and whys of engaging in the longer term in communities and multi-generational, as this is a kind of goal, if you will, to ensure that the organization stays vital and alive and is meeting a set of changing needs over time. Could you say a couple words about that, please?
You're absolutely right on. I think nonprofits, sort of struggle surviving through different generations. And so recognizing the needs of the community, but also recognizing how you can engage the different generations is really important, because not everybody can go to a fun run, and so, but we also have another program where we have a holiday food drive for the elderly. And so we have also elderly cooking and baking for the elderly, and then we deliver those goods, with another group of younger students and teenagers, from another school who are in a nursing school, right? So it's important for to have different programs that engage different generations, so that those programs can be sustained over time, and also to draw awareness to the different needs in the community. And sustainability is the key of all programming long term, and so that's why it's been important to do that through different generations that we have been able to engage.
Well, that's really fascinating work, Lenka. Thank you so much for that. Now, I'd like to pass it back to you for any final words.
Um, no matter what the nonprofit is out there, sustaining their goals and initiatives, I think, is very difficult. And so I just encourage donors and volunteers to get out there and continue to be supportive and helpful. Recognize the different needs that nonprofits have, and be as supportive as you can. And if you have new ideas and resources and initiatives that you see visibly in your community, that in some way that nonprofit could benefit from, I mean, please speak out. And I think ultimately, as a whole, we can all make a difference together when we're all communicating together for a positive cause and a mission for individual nonprofits.
That's a great way to end it, Lenka. So thank you very much for joining us today. And I also have to tell participants, it was a conversation with Lenka 2 weeks ago that brought this series this week, where she suggested to me, hey, Chris, let's talk about nonprofits and their engagement in our communities and in the world. So Lenka, thanks for that as well. Really appreciate it with you and all of our guests this week who have brought us, I think, a deeper and richer understanding of those nonprofits in our community who are engaged in international issues, international operations, all around the world. So it's just been a fascinating kind of tour of the globe to see where Montanans are working, what they're doing, and what their impact is. So thank you very much for that. Now, once again, to the participants, if you missed any of the shows, we post them on YouTube and on our Facebook feed. So please have a look there. You'll see some absolutely fascinating community members, Montanans, and leaders of nonprofits doing amazing work, together with the other 25 shows that we've had over the past 2.5 months, a huge range of people from all around the world coming here to talk to us about what they do and why they do it. So please do have a look at that. Thank you all very much for joining us. So until our next show, wishing you all well. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for having me.